Yeah, you posted on X, you said Operation Epic Fury, President Trump has been willing to do what's right and necessary to produce real peace in the region. God bless the United States, our great military, and Israel. You have others like Thomas Massie who wrote this: acts of war unauthorized by Congress. The U.S. is attacking Iran, according to the AP. What is your response to Massie and to your colleagues who don't agree with this?
No, that's bizarre.
The bombs were already falling when Congress found out. Not through a classified briefing, not through a formal notification of imminent hostilities. Senator Marco Rubio placed calls to the Gang of Eight, the 8 senior congressional leaders cleared for the most sensitive intelligence, and told them what was already happening. A heads up. That is the word the administration used. Not a consultation, not an authorization, a heads up. Here, play this clip.
So, Senator, we're getting notice from reports that Marco Rubio did call the Gang of Eight to give them a heads up that this operation was happening. From a congressional standpoint, what do you want to hear from the administration about, since this has the potential of lasting weeks, what do you want to hear from them?
Well, I mean, if we don't know how long it would last, but I would look back what happened in June when Israel had the war against Iran, and it took just a couple days for Iran.
And in that single bureaucratic phrase, the executive branch declared, without stating it plainly, that Congress no longer controls when this country goes to war. Operation Epic Fury is now underway. The United States and Israel are conducting joint strikes against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Ballistic missile sites, nuclear facilities, command compounds. The Ayatollah himself is a declared target. These are not warning shots. This is a sustained, coordinated military offensive against a sovereign nation, and it began without a single congressional vote. The Associated Press has confirmed the scope of these strikes. Representative Thomas Massie, a sitting member of Congress, has designated these actions publicly and precisely as unauthorized acts of war. Senator Tim Kaine, exercising his constitutional authority, introduced a War Powers resolution to force a formal vote. The Senate rejected it 47 to 53. General Jack Keane, describing the intelligence behind the targeting of Iranian commanders and leadership figures, called it exquisite. Here, play this clip.
What is your knowing, and we heard General Jack Keane say the intel on these individuals is so, quote, exquisite, he said. He said he didn't want to go into it, but we know where these individuals are. Did they have time? Do you think we got them? And if we did, when will we hear that?
These are not anonymous sources or partisan accusations. This is the documented record, and the documented record confirms what the law already defines. A sustained military offensive against a foreign government is an act of war. The constitutional framework is not ambiguous. The President commands the military. Congress declares war. That division exists not by accident, but by design, by a deliberate choice to prevent any single person from committing the nation to armed conflict alone. The War Powers Resolution exists precisely because that boundary has been tested before, and because Congress, in the aftermath of Vietnam, chose to codify it in statute. An executive notification is not a declaration. A phone call is not a vote. When the administration calls the Gang of Eight to inform them that bombs are already in the air, that is not compliance with the law. That is the performance of compliance while bypassing it entirely. The distinction matters because the precedent it sets matters. Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, serving on the Homeland Security Committee, has become the most visible legislative defender of this operation. When confronted on Fox News with the legal requirement for congressional authorization, Fetterman called that argument bizarre. Here, play this clip.
You know, I'd like to remind my colleague over in the House that Iran massacred 30,000 of their own people right now. This war is not about the Iranian people. It's about this poisonous regime. And that's why I'm proud to stand with our military. I'm proud to stand with Israel, too. I might be a Democrat, but in this specific case, the president is absolutely correct to do these kinds of actions. And now we have Israel's back. And now that's why it's entirely the path for peace in that region. How many treaties, how much negotiation? I never thought they would work.
He posted his support publicly, writing that the president has been willing to do what is right and necessary to produce real peace in the region. He went further. When asked how he would vote on the War Powers resolution, Fetterman said his vote is Operation Epic Fury. He did not vote on a resolution, he named a military offensive, and in doing so, he handed the constitutional power of the legislative branch directly to the executive, not under pressure, not under confusion, but voluntarily and on camera. The administration's justification is not hidden. Iran was attempting to acquire a nuclear weapon. Negotiations since 1979 have consistently failed. Brute force, the argument goes, is the only language that produces results. Here, play this clip.
That's a demonstration of Israel's capabilities. And now we have here America standing there where a lot of the kinetic kinds of brute force in that region as well now too. I think that partnership, whether the Israeli intelligence and that kind of very specific kinds of things and the American firepower there, that's what seems to be pretty effective right now thus far here.
These strikes were preemptive and therefore not acts of war requiring legislative approval. That last claim is the one that carries the legal weight, and it is the one the law directly contradicts. There is no constitutional exemption for preemptive offensives. There is no carve-out that transforms sustained joint military strikes targeting sovereign leadership and nuclear infrastructure into something other than what they are. The argument that preemptive action is categorically distinct from war is not a legal interpretation. It is a rhetorical strategy designed to avoid legal accountability, and it is being tested right now in real time against a real adversary with real weapons. The mechanics of how this consolidation works are worth examining precisely. The executive branch controls the moral framing by citing the administration's claim that Iran has massacred 30,000 of its own people. It controls the intelligence framing by having General Keane speak to the precision of targeting. It controls the political framing by ensuring that the first Democrat to speak loudly is one defending the operation. Every mechanism of public accountability, congressional debate, independent legal review, opposition messaging, is preempted before it can form. The vote on the War Powers resolution is the clearest evidence. 47 senators supported oversight. 53 voted to let the strikes continue unchecked. That is not a close call. That is a majority of the Senate choosing executive deference over constitutional responsibility. The institutions designed to arrest this kind of consolidation have now failed in sequence. The Department of Justice has not addressed the legality of targeting foreign heads of state without a declaration of war. The courts have not intervened. The Senate majority rejected the one procedural mechanism available to reassert oversight. The intelligence committees received a notification, not a briefing seeking consent, not a hearing, not a markup, a notification. And the system absorbed it. There were no injunctions, there were no emergency sessions. The institutional architecture held its shape while its function collapsed, which brings the responsibility into focus with uncomfortable clarity. President Trump bears direct responsibility for initiating an unauthorized military conflict against a sovereign nation without seeking legislative approval. Senator Fetterman bears responsibility for actively dismantling the legal argument that could have constrained it, and for doing so publicly, on record, with evident conviction. The Senate majority bears responsibility for rejecting the only available legislative remedy when it was placed directly before them. These are not abstract failures of governance or distant institutional shortcomings. They are named, documented, and permanently on the record. Fitness for constitutional office requires more than the willingness to use force when force is politically popular. It requires the willingness to submit force to the constraints of law, regardless of the moment's pressure. What has been established tonight is not a prediction. It is a precedent. Future administrations of any party will point to Operation Epic Fury as proof that sustained military campaigns can begin without congressional authorization, that a phone call to 8 senators constitutes legal compliance, and that the War Powers Resolution is a procedural formality rather than a binding constraint. The next operation will not need to justify its legal basis as carefully. The one after that will need to justify it even less. The Constitution does not authorize war by notification. It does not authorize war by consensus among 8 leaders who were called only after the first strikes were already in the air. It places the power to send this country into armed conflict with the elected representatives of the people, all of them voting on the record, accountable to the public. That is not a procedural preference or matter of interpretation alone. That is the foundational design of a government that is supposed to be answerable. What is happening now is not that design functioning under extraordinary pressure. It is that design being deliberately set aside. Before we close, one quick clarification. This script is based entirely on publicly available reporting, official statements, legislative records, and documented positions from named individuals. It does not represent a call to action of any kind. Reasonable people examining the same record will interpret the legal and political questions here differently, and those interpretations deserve serious engagement. The goal of this content is to present the documented facts and their constitutional implications as clearly and accurately as possible, so that viewers can form their own informed judgments. If this kind of analysis is useful to you, consider subscribing and joining the discussion in the comments below. Thoughtful disagreement is always welcome here.